Sandra Lynn Johnson-Hughes vanished in the Sierra National Forest in 2020. Her campsite lay abandoned, belongings scattered. Then came strange sightings. Hikers glimpsed a disoriented, barefoot figure vanishing into the trees. Weeks passed, and hope faded. But if it wasn't Sandra, who or what was lurking in the forest? In this almost certainly not companion series, we examine each episode's origins, production process, behind the scenes, personal thoughts, and most likely go off on some tangents in spite of our best efforts. In this episode, we examine Electric Blue, the disappearances of Sandra Hughes. I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this is Possibly Not. So, Dan, this is obviously the first episode of Possibly Not, and it's
almost certainly.
It's the companion to Almost Certainly Not, the YouTube series that we've started. So
accurate. You're doing great so far.
Thank you. Just to start off with, I guess, can we talk about how you got the idea for this whole project?
I think it started with, I know it started with, I published my memoir and kind of got into that writing mode. And I had long been keeping sort of some notes, kind of a running list about just things that I was interested in, topics and stories that I thought were, because there's such a glut of like true crime and mystery stuff, especially with Netflix doing the Unsolved Mysteries reboot. And you really can't, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a true crime podcast or YouTube channel.
I know, I've listened to most of them.
So I thought I didn't want to do any of those stories, but I was keeping sort of a running list of stories that I thought were interesting and maybe less well known. And it started with I just sort of on a whim, I started a Substack, basically like a personal magazine where I was started to publish do some research and format them. And I sort of found a voice. And I repurposed the title Almost Certainly Not, which has been used in various forms. But I just like the way it sounds because it's a little committal and you know probably where I'm coming from before you even start reading if it's called Almost Certainly Not. But anyway, I was doing that and was fairly prolific, but it's a little, writing is a very solitary experience, which isn't news. But we've worked together a lot in the past, and I thought I have a decent audience on Substack. I mean, very, very low comparatively speaking. But most of what I find on Substack when I look at like Substack Home is people writing articles about how to make money by using Substack. So not actual writers.
Is it really?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
I honestly haven't looked into Substack beyond yours.
So the person's Substack is entirely dedicated to how you're fucking up Substack and how you could make more money if you pay them to subscribe to their Substack. They'll tell you how to be successful on Substack.
This is a great ad for Substack, by the way.
I don't care, but no actual like very little substantive. There's a lot of political commentary, people churning out, almost treating it like a news outlet. And I saw very little personal essays, very little essays or articles in general, very little fiction. Maybe I haven't looked deeply enough. But anyway, that's how I started. And then I thought, we've done work together in the past. I always hear your voice. This was a little bit different because I wrote it in my voice, obviously. These are my opinions and my research and my approach. But I thought, we both, I have a film background and I'm a decent editor. And I thought it would be fun and maybe interesting for people and maybe reach a wider audience if at first I thought video essays, and then I started to think about it more cinematically and thought like short films, turn these into mini documentaries, short films, very cinematic. And so, of course, I thought of your voice. I thought that your voice and my writing have they go together like I can't think of an example. Things like it goes together like things that another set of things that go together goes with, basically.
Like peanut butter and jelly.
I don't like that. I don't
Oh,
eat
okay.
those
All
though,
right. All
so
right.
I
Never
don't.
mind then.
But anyway, that's how it started, and then I thought, what's the approach? And uh put some thought into it, and then just, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you and I are both working. I'm writing for a living. You're doing voiceover,
Mm-hmm.
for a living, uh, which pays the bills. Neither of which I think is that creatively
I
fulfilling
am
for
very
either of us.
fulfilled by all of my clients' writings. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Uh,
every voiceover job that I get.
oh, I didn't realize that we were lying in this. Okay. So yeah, me too. I feel very creatively fulfilled by technical writing. But anyway, I just basically sent you an email on a whim and
Mm-hmm.
said, would you want to do this? I think the most interesting thing is that it took me some time to. I don't think that you fully understood the concept of what I was going for. Like
Can I tell
even
you
after we
something?
recorded this, I think that it still wasn't clear. I don't know if that's my fault or yours.
Uh oh, it's 100% mine. If I could be absolutely honest with you about something, I barely read that email that you sent me.
Well,
I
which is
sort
interesting
of
because
I sort of
your
skimmed
response.
through it and I went, yeah, all right, I'll do that. Because it was just like, I feel like working with you for me is a no-brainer. We've known each other for what, like 20 years now? Something like that.
Yeah,
So,
I think we met in 2004.
yeah, like a no-brainer for me. So I was like, oh, he wants to do something? Yeah, sure. We'll iron out the details later. I'm sure we'll talk about it. Yeah, this is great. Absolutely. And then
Well,
just
that's
like let
fun
it go.
because I think your response, I like how little thought you put into it because your response was like, fuck yes, I would love that. When do we start?
That was literally it. I was just like, yeah, all right, go on then. What do we do?
But I remember the first conversation that we had, you were like, so like what, like how do you want to talk about this?
Yeah,
Do you
like
want to like do
explain this
talking
to me
points?
because I
And
didn't actually read the email. So, like, if you could just
yeah,
explain this to me again, do double the work, that would be great.
I I think you thought that it would be this, that we would be discussing
That is
these.
what
And
I
I said,
thought
"Oh
it
no."
was.
I said, "Oh no, 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 no. The script is the article. I want you to perform it. And then you're the storyteller,
Mm-hmm.
and then the narrator, and then I will put images over it. So there is none of this.
Which
There's no
genuinely,
discussion."
genuinely makes it so much easier for me anyway, because I am used to being a talking prop. So I was just like,
Do
yeah, absolutely.
do you want to just quickly tell the people how like unnecessarily nervous you are about hosting this companion show?
I'm almost positive that you're going to take some of what I said earlier and probably cut it in here somewhere because that's something that you do. It does
No,
make
that doesn't
me
sound like me.
it it does make me a little bit nervous because I am, I'm an actor, so I'm used to people giving me words to say. So in this kind of context, and we've done things before. I know we're not getting into the old days, but we've done things before like this. But for some
Yeah.
reason, I think because I haven't done anything like this in a very long time, and because I am so invested in this project, I think I got nervous, which is odd for me, really. But it's
Well, so basically,
fine.
you're saying that you're putting a lot of effort and thought into something you care about.
It's new for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It is new for me. No,
Oh,
I'm
I guess that goes back to that speaks to your point about being creatively fulfilled by all your client work, I guess.
100%. I love doing commercial voiceovers. It's my favorite thing, truly. Well, we've kind of got into how we started this. Well, you and I suppose I should include myself in that. How we started this series.
Yes.
Let's get into this first story. Electric Blue, the Sandra Hughes disappearance. How do
Yes.
you remember how you first heard about this?
I do, but unfortunately, I can't give you maybe as many specifics as you or the people would like. I remember it. I remember adding it to my list because I encountered it as there is some compilation videos that you can find on YouTube where people don't have a lot of content. So they do like, here's a video with 3 unsolved mysteries, and it's 20 minutes long, and they give it each one they give 5.5 minutes. And I thought that's an interesting story. And I actually came at it from a different perspective, which is I love sort of survival stories like Touching the Void, The Summit. Even there's a fantastic documentary about the 1996 Mount Everest disaster where a lot of people died and some people made it out as sort of harrowing. But all of those stories are people overcoming sort of insurmountable odds
Yeah.
and coming out the other side alive. And this one was more mysterious. And I thought there's the sightings aspect of it after that have a ghostly feeling to them. And so I thought, oh, that would be sort of interesting. I want to know more about this just personally. And so I started doing research and reading what was available. But I also thought, like, I mean, it basically whet my appetite for the story. And I thought so I can't tell you who that was, who presented it. But I thought that's not enough. There's got to be more meat on the bone to this. And I can sort of tell a ghost story without a ghost story. So I can make it feel like a ghost story without it being a ghost story. And I'm fascinated by what happened, and it's an unknown thing. So I did 1 or 2 other articles before this, but this is the one where I feel like I found the tone and my voice for what I wanted to do with the articles.
Well, speaking of that, I mean, these stories you can just jump down the rabbit hole on these, I'm sure. So I know you have to keep it concise for the purposes of your articles and obviously for the purposes of now our show as well.
Right.
So you have to come at it from a very specific angle. What was your angle for this episode, and what inspired you to kind of take that direction?
Well, I think it was primarily the sense of I could inject a sense of sort of dread and the ghostliness of it without. I think it's the subsequent sightings after her disappearance.
I agree.
To what extent are they the same person? Are they mistaking someone? How long did she survive? How credible are these sightings? Particularly the one with the little girl, where that one can be interpreted a number of ways, but if there's a quote unquote ghost encounter, that occurs in late July of 2021. And Sandra Hughes went missing in early July of 2020. So that occurs a full year after the initial disappearance. And I thought that was a good way to open the article and a good way to close it. So I think it's really the subsequent sightings, why she went missing. I mean, she definitely went missing. We know that. We know that she definitely crashed her car and abandoned her campsite in disarray. We know that there's at least one sighting subsequent to that after her campsite is found abandoned and her car is found crashed, that, at least from the sources that I've encountered, is a confirmed sighting. And then the rest of them have the common thread of barefoot, disheveled, and refusing to acknowledge, communicate. But to what extent is that a different woman who's barefoot? What are the odds of that? Is it coincidence? I don't know. And then I thought that there was an approach. There's sort of 2 criteria for the stories I pick. Is it well known? Is it like, are you going to get every mystery and true crime podcast covering this? Are there thousands of results if you search it? And I think that there are some outlets that have covered this, but I think what's most interesting and what was hardest for me is the dearth of reporting on this. It's like local. It became a national story with some very, very basic overview stuff, which is probably where the original video that I encountered, doing this in 5 minutes came from, because there's not a ton of information. And a lot of it is like local newspaper reporting from the county adjacent, the Madera County Sheriff's Department.
Well, yeah, I
And there's
mean,
also conflicting stories
yeah,
in
woman goes
newspapers.
missing in a forest is not really like national news, though, is it?
And we also cover, I covered in the article and you cover in the essay that hundreds of people a year go, quote unquote, they go missing
Mm-hmm.
for a couple days, possibly. It's easy to get lost in the Grand Canyon, any of the national parks, but man or woman goes missing for a day and then is found is not going to be on NBC like Good Morning America.
Yeah.
Man missing for 12 hours is found. It's not really a headline. This one I think is, like I said, there's more meat on the bone because of the subsequent sightings. And to what extent are they her confusion? People like attention, so maybe like you're a hiker in the middle. I think that was interesting to me too. Is you're a hiker in the middle of the woods. You could claim to have seen her and be lying.
Oh, especially if you're familiar with the story, I'm sure. And then your name sort of gets splashed about in the media for your 10 seconds of fame. Yeah,
Exactly, which
definitely.
is, I mean, absolutely repulsive, right? But people are absolutely capable of that. So I
100%.
think that there was, yeah, there was more to this than your average missing person. And the thing that it was sort of the inverse of what typically captures my imagination, which is that she hasn't been found, but it seems to, if you take the subsequent sightings at face value,
Mm-hmm.
she was spotted. I mean, she survived for, if you take all the sightings by hikers in Johnson Meadows and deeper in the terrain of the Sierra National Forest, if you take them at face value and assume for the sake of argument that those are right, that means that she survived for possibly weeks,
Mm-hmm.
barefoot, disheveled, without supplies, in a pretty rugged terrain. So even though we don't know what happened, I think to play devil's advocate, let's say for argument's sake that those are all legitimate sightings of Sandra Hughes, she survived for longer than you probably should in that state.
Well, do you think
Um,
she is still alive at this point?
no,
You don't think so?
no.
I think there might be
It's
a
been
chance.
well, I mean, I mean, she was described as an experienced hiker,
Exactly, yeah. She's an
but
outdoors person. I mean, personally, I
well,
think she had
experienced, yeah.
yeah, personally, I think maybe like a psychotic break or something like that. And then, I
Well,
mean,
here's the thing about people. Experienced hiker does not mean live off the land indefinitely.
that's true.
And also, I agree with you about the psychotic break, and we can get into that more. People in a psychotic break are not typically the most reliable and or what's the word that I'm searching for that's evading me? They're not good at planning
Mm-hmm.
and executing a plan.
But
Especially, I
would you
mean,
be planning at
her
that point or just living moment to moment on like a survivalist
like a feral
instinct?
creature.
Yeah.
Without shelter and a steady source of water and game, living off the land in a psychotic stupor. Well, I mean, psychotic breaks are not indefinite more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
So if she was still alive, um, the acute phase of that should have passed. And then if she was still alive, she would have walked out of the forest by now.
Unless she didn't want to.
Well, that's the other option, is that this was the plan, that she wanted to disappear and live off the land sort of indefinitely and hide.
Or she could not
But
be in the forest at all. She could have left the forest and gone somewhere else and just sort of become a
well, and
different person.
this is the meat on the bone. And it's almost, I mean, people do that, but they also never do that. Especially today, it's very hard to, like, you would have to um assume a new identity. Um I mean, there are so many cameras, Ring cameras. I mean, anytime that you want to go to a bank or a grocery store, you're on camera. So it's more difficult than it's ever been to assume a new identity. It's not like in 1910 you could just move to a town 10 miles away and effectively just say my name is Frank Johnson. Um, but today with all of you can't check into a hotel without ID and a credit card.
It's true. And it would take a lot of technological know-how to change your identity enough to fool any of these systems.
I believe I could do that now. I believe that because there are other stories of people who are already under a tremendous amount of psychological pressure, and it takes a thing to break them. It could be innocuous or it could be big. There have been other stories of people. I could think of two off the top of my head that are relatively well known and famous, where it involves the person already being under a tremendous amount of psychological stress.
Mm-hmm.
One of them involves a car crash. One of them involves a car breaking down, and that person is never heard from again. And I think that the car crash, her car being found crashed and abandoned, if she was already teetering on the brink and got even a minor concussion or head injury, that would have been enough for her to just, to almost enter a fugue state, possibly.
Yeah.
But somebody in a fugue state or a psychotic break, let's say for argument's sake that wasn't her plan all along, to crash her car and abandon her campsite and become a new person, which again, in 2024, it's almost impossible. It's not, but it's possibly impossible or almost certainly impossible.
But also, who is to
Um,
say that she is the one who crashed her car? Because
I guess
her
nobody
campsite
specifically,
was, she had a campsite set up, obviously, and that was
but who,
a bit away
but
from her
the thing that
car.
it is, but the thing that we also can't say is in what order those things happened.
That's
They were
true.
discovered in a certain order, but we don't know what order they occurred in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think if you were frustrated by the episode not having any conclusions, you're not going to find them here either. Because the simple fact is that, well, the thing that I found and that I added to the end of the episode is that I have found sources that claim that a body matching her description was discovered in 2021. That came from two different sources, neither of which I thought were credible, and other sources, including the last information I was capable of obtaining from the Madera County Sheriff's Department, is that she is still considered a missing person. Something that I didn't include additionally because I thought it would just add. It happened subsequently because they searched for her for a long time. There were a series of fires subsequently in the Sierra National Forest, so there is also a chance that if she did die in that area,
That could be how.
that's part of the reason they abandoned the search, is that would consume a body, maybe even the skeleton, if it burned long enough. So,
Oh yeah, I think fire only leaves like teeth, doesn't it?
maybe not even. If it was a raging forest
That's
fire,
true. Yeah,
that would
that's
be
true.
akin to a crematorium. So, and also there's animals there, so there's animal predation, which tend to scatter bones in all directions. Or if it was a bear or
Well,
something,
and it's
they
a
might take a
huge
body,
area as well.
huge body, back to a den or any number of things. And that's the thing. Any number of things could have happened. I will say that I think the most likely thing is that she was recently widowed. People had described her family members had described her as in a relatively cheerful mood, but distant, oddly distant for her personality. Then she sets out on a solo hiking trip, has a car accident, maybe sustains some sort of even a minor concussion, and loses touch with reality. Somebody who has lost touch with reality, for argument's sake, let's say that happened, they might eke out a survival for a certain amount of time in a wilderness like that, but not indefinitely. I believe that she died shortly after her car and campsite were discovered, within weeks. That's what I believe probably is most likely to have occurred. I cannot prove that, and nobody can.
No, of course not. And the sightings have stopped for all intents and purposes, correct?
The last sighting that I am aware of that I was able to find through research is the incredibly dubious sighting of the little girl at
Mm-hmm.
the incidentally, like, there's conflicting reports. Some of them say it was a little girl at a picnic. Some of them say that it was a little boy in a car
Oh.
moving past. Um, and so there's you kind of get to pick and choose your like your facts here even.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I didn't spend too much time on clarification there because I feel like a little girl at a picnic or a little boy sitting in a car is six of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't believe that they saw her, and I don't believe that they saw a ghost, but I think it added atmosphere. So at least that's the last unconfirmed sighting,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, and that occurred in July of 21. And we're now in November of 2024 as we record this.
So it sounds like obviously you do not believe in any sort of ghost you don't believe in any sort of apparition or ghost or anything like that.
I do not. And the only reason I say that, if you'll bear with me, it's only because there's absolutely no evidence of any kind that such a thing exists. That's the only reason I don't believe in it. It's because there's no evidence that it exists in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I
But
think
that's all. Call me a hard ass.
well, you are a hot ass. But I think for that reason, that's why I don't know that I believe it, but I don't disbelieve it, if you know what I mean. Like, just because I haven't seen something doesn't mean it doesn't exist, I think.
Do you believe in fairies?
I mean, I've never seen one, have you? I would love to believe in fairies. No, I don't.
Well,
I mean, I
well,
understand
there's a
what you're
difference
saying.
between There's a difference between believing and wanting to. It sounds like you want to, or you want to keep the door open, as do I. But I am more of the opinion that there's not a physicist or a psychologist or parapsychologist or any. I mean, if we discovered that ghosts were part of nature in some way, whatever you wanted to, do you have any idea how famous that person would? They would be on the
Oh,
level of Einstein, the person who discovers that ghosts are part of nature. But then it's not. We're talking about the supernatural.
mm-hmm.
If we discover and quantify that ghosts exists in some way or shape or form, then that's just part of nature. It's not supernatural anymore.
I agree. I agree. But I feel like there are so many different accounts throughout history of like
You what? What was that?
apparitions. I think that,
What was that word you used?
what do you mean?
You feel.
I do. I don't feel. I mean, I know I've heard of so many different accounts throughout history of ghostly apparitions, that's across cultures as well. Which that's where I find it a little bit unsettling is if it was strictly like a Western thing, if it was strictly in one certain area, but this is across civilizations, across cultures, across the world, there have been quote unquote sightings or stories of apparitions, and not just recently, but I mean hundreds of years ago. So how would any of that be explained? I mean, do you think that's just people wanting to believe that that is real? Do you think those things are easily explainable?
I think that I think that they think they saw something. I would say that it's the same way that if you go back into the post-Roman, early modern, or sort of para pseudo modern Catholic Church, as the dogma of that was adopting pagan, like incorporating pagan beliefs into it and Christianizing them. It's the reason that you'll find some people buried in graves with stakes driven through them so they can't get up,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of the vampire thing. It was superstition. It was, uh, I mean, that person might have been schizophrenic, might have been some. It I don't think those people were not vampires, but the people at the time believed they did.
No, but
And the other thing about cross culturalism is that the human animal is pattern seeking and is easily. There's a reason that, like, witness testimony is growing less and less relied upon is that human beings are great at emotional memory and terrible at biographical and chronological memory. We remember when we are thinking of something, we're actually remembering the last time we remembered it and how it makes us feel, as opposed to a recording chronologically of exactly what happened. I believe that unless you're trying to sell something, or unless you're producing a piece of shit ghost adventures type television series where you need to have PAs off screen making creepy sounds because otherwise you don't have any content. I believe that those people believed they saw something, but how many times have you seen something out of the corner of your eye or just got an eerie feeling, and then your brain, the brain is going, we're pattern seeking.
Yeah.
We're going to try to make sense out of things that make us uncomfortable. And so when somebody says, sometimes somebody have tried to convince me of the existence of ghosts because someone else's aunt saw a ghost. And I'm like, well, that you can't possibly be serious that that's your evidence for why you believe. All I'm hearing is that you're telling me a story about someone else's aunt who saw a creepy ghost in a white flowing dress in the middle of the night when there was lightning. Well, that was the dark, and we're afraid of what, I mean, I'm not impervious to that. If I get it in my head that, like, oh my God, it's dark and I'm alone, and I know that I'm going to come into this room, this back room that I'm in right now where I'm recording this, and the lights are off, I get a sense of unease, but that's more about, I don't know what's behind that door. I'm pretty sure I do, but I think that people are susceptible to that. And I think if it did exist by now, there's no good reason that, I don't think I've ever seen a piece of footage, a picture, video, and especially witness testimony that cannot be easily explained by something else. Especially, we both work in film.
Mm-hmm.
People don't tend to understand the way that when you film something, you're not filming what's occurring, you're filming the lens's interpretation of what's occurring. Um, and camera lenses are capable of a perspective tricks. Something can appear closer or further away. If there's lighting behind the camera or as a part of a camera, a piece of dust in night vision floating in front of a camera is going to have this orbing effect, but that's because of the amount of exposure that's being let through the aperture and the light bouncing off of it. So I think that it's just that people don't understand how it's captured, and then sometimes it's just plain old hoaxes. And especially today, where if you're slightly talented with computer graphic imaging, you can make an incredibly convincing. You could buy a $2,000 Mac with After Effects and Final Cut Pro and make like Hollywood level ghosts and
Oh, yeah.
superimpose
I
it
mean,
onto.
you can do
So
that with ChatGPT on your phone if you want to.
yeah, but that's today with everyone's got a camera, a video camera in their pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been people who have dedicated careers to trying to prove that something like this exists, and nobody's made any headway. There's never been anything that convinced me. So, and I give almost no credence to the across cultures. I mean, people were so much more superstitious, understood so much less about the way that the world worked. We're much more susceptible to superstition, because they were trying to do what we all do, which is to fill the gaps in our knowledge with whatever
Mm-hmm.
is there. And I would kind of counter that with pyramids. The pyramid shape occurs across cultures. Everybody's got a god of the sea and a god of the sun. I don't think the fact that it occurred across cultures, the human brain is kind of set up in that sort of pattern seeking way, evolutionary and biologically, we're very uncomfortable with encountering something that we don't understand,
That's very
and
true.
making up a story to explain it is more comfortable to us than saying, I have no idea. But if somebody comes to me and said, I was alone, it was the middle of the night, I just woke up and went to get some water, it was completely dark, it was storming outside, and lightning flashed, and I saw a woman standing there with a screaming face in white. I'm like, well, you imagine that because you were already spooked out a little bit. That was actually a dream, or it was just something that you felt and it was out of the corner of your eye and the mind plays tricks on you. That doesn't impress me.
Well,
That
so
doesn't, I lend no credence to that whatsoever.
Well, then bringing it back to the story, do you think it was actually her that people were seeing, or do you think it was this made up sort of version apparition of her that people were seeing? Do you think it's possible that it could have actually been her, like that the little girl or little boy, whichever, actually saw her?
I believe for that specific instance, I believe that the person, the little girl, the little boy, like I say in the story, the parents hadn't noticed it, but her missing poster was in the parking lot that they
Mm-hmm.
would have parked at to get to the park. So kids, I don't even know if the kids are like, the kid might not have been lying, but kids' imagination, like I say in the episode or in the article, kids' imaginations being what they are, depending on how old the child was, kids have imaginary friends. She may have believed it,
I think children are
but I don't add
actually
any.
far more observant than we are as adults as well.
They do, but they have, they have imaginary friends, and the distance between um what they want to see and what they actually do see. Well, I don't know. I guess adults aren't any better at that, but kids are more likely to lean into it, I think. So I put almost no credence into that one. I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that hikers did in the early within 2 weeks of her disappearance. I believe that some of those actually happened. I don't think it was a ghost. I think that she was disoriented and possibly having a psychotic break, possibly in a fugue state. And I do believe, at least in those early days, that those are one of them is confirmed. They, at least the sheriff's office in their statement, considers the first sighting a week after.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's on the 11th to be a confirmed sighting that was Sandra Hughes. The subsequent ones are a little bit more nebulous, but I believe at least a portion of those, some percentage, was her, a living being who was barefoot and tattered and lost, and maybe didn't know where she was, maybe didn't know her own name, maybe was afraid of these people, and that's why she didn't respond. It kind of falls into the who knows category. But I do believe some of them were legitimate. I think that the sighting by the little girl is absolutely not. Whether that's she saw the picture on the way in, and one of those pictures, like I highlight in the episode, is Sandra's face shape and with blue hair. So I don't think it's a huge leap to say that that was just in her at least in the child's subconscious, and maybe it was a boring fucking picnic, and she was like, I need to spice this up a little bit for myself. I don't
Yeah.
want to be here.
Yeah, I find
um
it actually, when I first looked at that picture that you showed me, I couldn't even tell that she had blue hair, to be honest with you. So I don't
it
know
was
how apparent it would be that her hair was blue.
the thing that it's also, that's also the highest resolution scan of that missing poster that exists online.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming it would have been like a vector image print that would be posted, perhaps even behind plexiglass. And I think if you were standing in front of one of those
You'd be able to
actual
see it.
printed ones, it would be much more obvious.
Yeah.
That was the best kind of resolution I could find. Um, but that's sort of neither here nor there. I don't believe I don't believe in ghosts. So if you, I mean, I have no evidence. Well, I mean, you can't prove a negative. And
That's
that's
true.
sort of like, if it's unfalsifiable, just within the scientific method, if there's no way to approach a topic to falsify the supposition, you default to it doesn't exist. Because one of the tests that you need to prove something is a methodology to disprove it. And if somebody comes to me and say, well, prove to me that there are no ghosts, that's proving a negative, which
Mm-hmm.
is impossible. It's your job to prove to me that there are ghosts, and then it's my job, or the scientific method's job, to determine a way to disprove your evidence, which they do all the time. They get in photographic or video experts that say like, well, this is obviously faked if somebody's hoaxing it, or like I said earlier, oh, you just don't know how camera lenses work. This isn't what you're not seeing what you think you're seeing.
People would respond really well to you saying that to them.
But the fact that people want to believe, I think what you're saying is that you find it intriguing and you would like to think that perhaps it does exist, which I have no issue with, but that is not the same as that ghosts probably exist.
I mean, I don't know if it's that I want them to exist. I think that I think that humans existing at all is such a bizarre and insane thing. I mean, and that's even if you look at the science of it. I think that there are some things that are unexplainable, and I don't discredit things just because they are unexplainable. And I come at this from a completely secular angle. Like, I'm not a religious person. But I
would disagree in only one spot.
Mhm.
I don't believe that there's anything that's unexplainable. I believe that there are things that have yet to be explained. And that's not the same
correct.
thing.
Yeah, no, I do still, yes, I would say that as well.
But if you're secular, you should also, there's nothing that we have in science or nature to say that if you are anything, the reason that we're having this conversation now is because your brain exists. When you die, the electricity in your brain ceases to function.
Mhm.
And I believe that if you are anything at all, you are your brain. We're basically, our bodies are a support system for our brain. And there is nothing that anyone has ever discovered that there is existence once the brain ceases to function, that there is a non-corporeal version of your essence that carries on, is not part of anything that we understand. Does that mean that it doesn't exist and that we won't prove it one day? No. But again, the fact that someone else's aunt got spooked out in the middle of the night during a thunderstorm is meaningless to me.
Yeah.
When it comes to the fundamentals, what I think it would be amazing. I would be thrilled. So I'm not saying that like ghosts definitely don't exist. I'm saying that there's nothing that I've ever heard or seen or felt
Mhm.
that would give me any indication that there's any reason to think currently that it's legitimate. And I don't mean a little bit and not enough to convince me. I mean nothing.
You are a very practical person.
But that's, I feel like you have to approach it that way. And to say like, I think it's perfectly acceptable to say the other thing, which is how cool would it be?
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, I mean, scientists are really only just getting into, areas like quantum physics, and that could possibly explain different planes of time and things like that, which, I mean, I haven't even really dived that deep into. I know they've made, obviously, films about it, but I think that's more along the lines of what I believe, not necessarily in like the spooky apparition sort of your spirit lives on type of thing, but perhaps you exist in another plane, and sometimes those planes cross over.
But that's just sort of wish fulfillment. It's also
Yeah,
like what's built into humans too, is that we're all incredibly solipsistic and we're all afraid of dying.
Of course.
So the
yeah.
idea that we're the center of our own universes and that we don't move on. Well, people are afraid of dying, and the way that I think the best way that I've ever I would be afraid of dying. If I knew I was about to die, I think I would be scared because I can't prove a negative, so I can't tell you what death is. My supposition based on everything I know about the brain is that you don't know that you're dead.
Mm-hmm.
You just, it's like go. And for the people who are scared, I say like, well, you might live for 80 to 100 years, which is the blink of an eye in geological and universal time. How scared of you for those 14 billion years before you were born? You didn't have consciousness. before you existed. You won't have consciousness after you die. And if you don't have any consciousness, there's no perception
Mm-hmm.
of either. So, I mean, you could be scared of, I think what we're actually scared about is the dying process.
Yeah,
It's
someone
the
someone once
unknown.
asked me when I said something about it. Obviously, not being a religious person, I find it very difficult to imagine an afterlife. I would love to imagine an afterlife. I would love to imagine that all of my loved ones who have passed on are in some sort of utopia afterlife. I personally really struggle with that. And so I was speaking to someone about it, and they said, "Are you afraid of falling asleep? Like every time you go to sleep, are you afraid to fall asleep?" And I said, "Well, no." And they were like, "Well, that's it, isn't it? You fall asleep and that's it." Like it's not. I mean, unless it's like a particularly violent way of going, I suppose.
Well, not even violent. I think I would be scared if I had cancer or something and it was there,
Just
at a certain point.
the impending death
Yeah.
would be frightening to you.
Almost like going into like having a very aggressive surgery.
Mm-hmm.
You would have that. I don't know what it's going to be like, and after the anticipation, but so I would say that the being, so there's a distinction between dying, which I think is what we're actually afraid
And
of, and
death.
being dead.
Yeah.
So I believe that once you are dead, you are only your brain function ceases, and it is like not existing anymore to you. Um, so I don't have any discomfort with that. I'm not searching for more because most things that have ever lived on this planet are not only dead but extinct. 99% of all species. So life is precious to us, but in the terms of like the Earth and the solar system and the galaxy and the universe, life is cheap. It comes and goes.
This is a
It
wildly
just
morbid episode to be our first
but
episode.
but it just is. And but what I'm saying is like most of the 7 billion humans that exist on this planet, the vast majority of them will never know that I lived or died.
Mm-hmm.
But the people in my life will. And when I'm gone, the only thing that you leave behind, I don't believe it's your spirit or a ghost. It's the memories that people have of you while you were there. That's what I have for people who died.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people, I don't believe in an afterlife. I don't even want to believe in an afterlife because
That's it.
I mean, just because I don't think, I think that the world is mysterious and majestic enough to me that I don't need that to seem to be fascinated by it and to be riveted by the experience.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find a gap there, and I think that if we live on in any form, it's what we leave behind. It's part of the reason I write. It's part of the reason I'm doing this right now.
Has anyone ever told you a story, or have you heard from someone some sort of ghost account that you have like either wanted to believe or you have been close to believing?
Never.
Never.
For a
Not like
single
a set of
second.
circumstances, nothing like that.
I go the opposite way. I poke holes in it and I mock
Well, that's
them
because
to
you're
their
a dick.
face.
So
But I don't, but that, it, again, I mean, I'm thinking of a very specific example where I said I don't believe in ghosts, and they said, well, my best friend's aunt told me this story.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let me just lay what you just said to me.
mm-hmm.
Someone else's aunt had this experience.
Yeah.
And that's what you're coming. It's not even you. It's not even your fucking aunt.
Yeah.
Somebody else's aunt told you, and like I said, the human mind or the brain is not good at biographical or chronological memory. It's more about the way that you felt at the time. And people tend to not, especially when it's something that you don't understand. They've done studies about this. People don't tell the story the same way every time because you might not know that you're exaggerating.
Yeah.
You might not know that you're remembering the last time. And if you got a good response to the first version of the story and now you're telling it to somebody else, you're remembering the last time you told that story. I'm capable of this. I'll spice it up a little. I want an audience. So
I don't know. I mean,
it means nothing to me.
I have so there, I mean, I've only ever had 2 stories that have kind of stuck out to me as far as something that could be credible or possible, but they both happen to people close to me. And I think, I don't know, I guess they're two completely different circumstances. One was very much like the girl seeing Sandra. My mother saw somebody. We were at a hotel in Florida, in, where was it? Key Largo, I think. It was like an old driftwood hotel. Years ago, I was very young. My mother woke up in the middle of the night and she saw a man standing in the hotel room. And one of those things where she looked again and he was gone. And then I think it was 2 days later, we went to check out of the hotel and we went into the lobby of the hotel somewhere my mother had never been.
And there was a
statue. Yeah, there was a statue of the
oh.
man, but she had never been in there before. But it is kind of like that. Well, did she see it somewhere? Or, I mean, yeah, so there is kind of that element to it. And then another one is
Well, and the other part of that story is, how sure is she that she actually woke up and it wasn't a dream about waking up and seeing a man?
That's true. That is very true. Another one is my husband's father was killed when he was very, very little. And when he was a teenager, he went scrapping for parts for, my husband went scrapping for parts for one of his cars. And
Can you say that again? Your husband's father was killed when he was very, very little?
Yeah, my husband's father was killed when he was 5.
How did he father a child?
My husband's dad died when my husband was 5. You know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I did, but I wanted to call out how confusing that sentence was.
Twat.
That you formed.
Anyway, so my husband later on, who was not my husband at the time when he was a teenager, went scrapping for parts for his car just at one of the lots in his town. And he said he felt kind of something calling him towards a certain car wreckage sort of thing that was sitting there. And it was not anything that he needed, but he went to it anyway and kind of looked through it. He opened a glove compartment and was like looking through it, and he found a class ring in there. Ended up taking the class ring home, and it was his father's class ring. Like, definitively, it was his father's class ring that he found in this like junkyard wreckage car that he was parting.
I will say that that's an extraordinary coincidence, but I will
Isn't
also
it,
say
though?
but I think it's just an extraordinary coincidence, which happens all the time.
I mean, that is madness, though.
But these things happen all the time. And I think I have 2 things to say to that. I know your husband, and I don't think that people can believe things that didn't happen. Like the part about being called or feeling like he should be compelled to go there could be something that he doesn't realize he inserted to explain the coincidence. I'm not saying that he's lying.
Yeah.
But here's an example. If you buy a lottery ticket and you win the lottery, that's extraordinary. The odds are so infinitesimal that you'll win the lottery that it would be like, I mean, it's a life-changing experience. Think about the odds. Think about your luck. Think about the feeling that you would have if you won $500 million on the first lottery ticket you ever bought. What are the odds of that?
Yeah.
How extraordinary. But how extraordinary is it that somebody wins the lottery?
It's not. I mean, somebody has to.
Exactly. The reason it's special if it happens to you is because it happens to you. And I will say that I just 2 Fridays ago, I attended a funeral. My uncle died. I wasn't very close to him, so I don't know what his favorite song was. But let's say, for argument's sake, leaving the funeral, I turn on the radio and his favorite song is playing. That would seem extraordinary to me. Like, what are the odds that his favorite song is playing? But that's because of the circumstances. How extraordinary would it be if it happened 2 months later while I was leaving the grocery store? It's about the proximity to the experience and that it's happening to you at a time when it seems coincidental, but the world is it's coincidental place.
But how do you, I mean, I guess this falls into the same category for me of how do you explain these coincidences? They're unexplainable.
Coincidences are unexplainable.
So how does that not leave the door open for there to be other things that exist that are unexplainable?
Because I don't need ghosts or an afterlife to bridge the gap between that which is unlikely and coincidental and that which is that's a jump for me.
Mm-hmm. It is,
I think it's more likely that it's just like winning the lottery is an extraordinary coincidence that your husband found that class ring. Extraordinary coincidences happen to everybody. To somebody in the world is probably having that very experience as we speak. There's 7 billion people.
Yeah.
I don't need an afterlife to explain that. It's an extraordinary coincidence, but that just happens. It's the thing where, like, you know, I think of a story that I heard about the idea of coincidence. And it's extraordinary because it happened to them, but it's not that extraordinary either that two people who lived in different countries ended up falling in love and becoming engaged. And so they were doing the meet the parents thing. And when you do the meet the parents thing, sometimes they trot out a photo album.
Mm-hmm.
These people met in their late 20s, lived in different countries, and at like, let's say that they lived in Scotland and the person who they married was raised in California, in Anaheim. Once and once only, the family from Scotland took their daughter to California and they went to Disneyland. And they're showing pictures of their trip to Disneyland. And the fiance, the man, says, wait a minute. So they take a picture in front of a fountain
Mm-hmm.
of the family from Scotland, including the little girl. And it says, wait a minute, in the background, that looks a lot like my dad. And then says, wait a minute, that little boy looks a lot like me. And then that is me. And there was only a couple of times that we went to Disneyland. And it turns out, and it was like he talked to his parents, they just so happened to have been in the same place at the same time 20 years earlier and taken a picture before they met at Disneyland, where they were both sets of families were in that picture.
That is extraordinary.
And it's an extraordinary coincidence. And if you want to, if you're a romantic, you could say, oh, it was meant to be. But it's just an extraordinary coincidence that is almost beyond our tiny chimp brains to comprehend. And so we want to fill that gap. And I think it's the same thing with your husband. And I think it's like wish fulfillment
Mm-hmm.
and a way, our desperation to explain that which is unknown. And coincidences make us uncomfortable.
I think you I think you hit it on the head as well, saying you're romanticizing it. I think we all romanticize our lives a little bit. Because,
I'm a romantic.
Yeah, because there's
I'm susceptible to that.
So much in the world to drag you down, romanticizing normal things in your life, you know.
But I don't need a supernatural or meant to be. I think, well, that's in and of itself, that's an extraordinary coincidence. That's enough. Enjoy that.
Yeah.
You don't need to go a step beyond that and say that it's something mystical. So I'm captivated enough by both what we know about the natural world, which is improving all the time, and I think that that's magical enough, and the size of the universe and the things that we know, and any scientist worth their salt will talk about how much is left to know. But it doesn't mean it's unknowable. It means we don't know yet. And I think that that's the journey of science, is to ever refine our understanding of the natural world. And so therefore, if ghosts or interdimensional beings, or we live beyond our brain, is discovered and quantifiable, then it's just another fascinating part of nature. And how wonderful would that be? But right now, it's just belief, hope, and wish fulfillment. And that's really all it is to me.
I'm Layla Lawrence.
And I'm Dan Lauer.
And this has been Possibly Not.